Welcome back to the Crash Course Podcast. My name is Craig Crash Collins, joined as always by Brandon Scott, otherwise known as B. Scott. The wait for Super Bowl 57 is almost over. As kickoff between the Chiefs and Eagles approaches, let's talk storylines. We discuss how a title affects each quarterback's legacy, which team is better at each position, and of course, who hoists the Lombardi Trophy Sunday night. It's going to be an incredible game. I'm really excited for it. First time in maybe 10 years or so that I have really not cared who won. That's pretty interesting. And you know,
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, like
when I think about it.
Yeah, you really go back. I think I go back to the 49ers and Ravens the last time, which oddly enough is the last time two brothers faced off in a Super Bowl. Because I was like, I didn't really care who won that game. Like I like Jim Harbaugh, I like John Harbaugh. I wanted to see Ray Lewis go out on top, but I like Jim Harbaugh just because of like the Andrew Luck connection and Stanford and all that stuff. So like I was like, I don't really care who wins that game. And then ever since, like, of course, wanted Peyton to beat Russell Wilson and the Seahawks that year. Wanted the Seahawks to beat Brady the following year. Wanted Peyton to go out on top. So like so on and so forth. So this is the first time. I mean, even in the Chiefs 49ers, like I wasn't going to be mad if the 49ers won, but I still wanted to see like Mahomes and the Chiefs get that title. So yeah, this is the first time like I'm okay with Hurts winning. I'm okay with Mahomes getting his second. So, but all in all though, it's going to be a really fun game.
Yeah, I mean, I guess thinking back, you're right. A lot of those, like that 49ers Ravens Super Bowl, didn't really have a horse in the race and just wanted a good game, which it was. We even got an extended game because of the power outage.
Right.
But yeah, that Chiefs 49ers one, I think I always tend to lean towards, because there was a time where Purdue had a really long active streak of having a player in the Super Bowl. And at that I always wanted to cheer for the team that had the Purdue player. And that year, the 49ers did, with Raheem Mostert. And, he had a really big touchdown in that game before the Chiefs came storming back. So I think I'm leaning a little bit towards the Chiefs this weekend. Yeah. Oh yeah, because of Karlaftis. So, but I mean, either way, I don't really, outside of that, I really just want to see a good game. And I think it's going to be a really good game.
Yeah. And we're going to dive into that game. And
hopefully the script says that.
Yeah. Oh, I have loved the script memes. There was a TikTok that I saw. I'll have to send it to you because my buddy Nikki sent it to me. I'll have to send it to you too, where they were going up to players of the Pro Bowl and asking them about their script for this year, like what they thought of it, and that kind of stuff. Like I love that. Like just the idea that the NFL is rigged is just so like funny to me. Because I mean, obviously it's clearly not. But just the fact that people have now taken it and made it a meme is just so funny.
Dude, what I love is that everything nowadays, everything is a conspiracy theory.
Right.
I mean, somebody could be watching this show and turn this into a conspiracy theory, I bet.
What would our conspiracy theory be? Like, what would the conspiracy be for us?
Craig's not really in a radio studio, and Brandon does not own that nice of a house.
Yeah, it's all. Well, no, that's it's the opposite. That's the conspiracy. Is that like people think, because look, I've had when we used to record the show live, like we had people in the chat that be like, that thought you were in, like that was your actual house. And so,
and it changed up every week too.
Right, like, exactly.
Dude, this guy owns just real estate all over.
Which is funny because my backdrop was like The Office. So, like, was I on the set of The Office too? Like, what if we're going with that? But like, yeah. So like, that could be the conspiracy if they don't think that you like, oh, how do these guys that have this podcast have like a nice radio studio to record in and a nice house to record in? Man, it must be some sort of front for something. So there you go. I think we figured it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're gonna dive into this game, Super Bowl 57. Not anything to report on the Colts front, so we get to dive in completely.
Oh no, there is something.
Well,
there is a decision. There is a decision coming, not within hours, within days. Within days, not hours.
Not hours.
Which leads me to believe it's Shane Steichen.
Which I'm okay with. I like that. And that's what's funny.
That
one of
was
the
one of
people
my
you brought
top
up.
two picks.
Yeah, and it's the thing is too is that people I've seen, of course, social media is going to be what it is, but I've seen people getting all hot and bothered because the Colts haven't made a decision. I was like, look, there were really only two big fishes out there in the coaching world, and really neither of them were going to be Colts coaches anyway. Like, you weren't going to get Sean Payton, and Jim Harbaugh was like a nice hope, but like it wasn't going to happen. So
Yeah.
I'd rather them take their time through the sea of like, everybody's going to be a little bit of a risk. The only guy that is off the board that I would have liked is D'Amico Ryans. Other than that,
But it was going to be a hard get considering he played for the Texans.
right, that's true.
I
So,
mean, so that's like if Jeff Saturday had really, really good coaching experience
right,
and it came down to the Colts and the Texans, who do you think Jeff Saturday is going to take a job with?
yeah, you would like
The
to think the
Colts.
Colts, yeah,
Yeah. But speaking of conspiracy theories, the two candidates that everybody's really wanting are either the offensive coordinator for the Eagles, Shane Steichen, for obvious reasons, or offensive coordinator from the Cincinnati Bengals, Brian Callahan. The conspiracy theorists out there, the watchdogs in the world, did report after Irsay put out his tweet that the offensive coordinator for the Bengals has listed his house on the market. But I just tend to believe if it was somebody that is already not coaching right now, like currently preparing to play in the Super Bowl, they would have hired him by now. Like
right,
if it was
yeah.
going to be Jeff Saturday, we would have heard it's Jeff Saturday. If it was going to, the other person that I've heard as a front runner, which I just hope it's not, just because of the name alone, but Wink Martindale.
Yeah.
I mean, we need a young coach. It's time to stop with the old guys. And but Wink Martindale would already have been announced. And I feel like the same thing with Brian Callahan, even though you did want to bring him in for a third round interview and you just did that. But I don't know. I just, it feels like it's going to be Shane Steichen because he's still coaching. He's in, he's preparing for the Super Bowl and it's going to be announced after the Super Bowl, which is within days.
Right. Well, speaking of the Super Bowl, let's go ahead, shift gears into our Super Bowl preview. We're going to talk about the two teams individually, and then we're going to dive into some bigger questions here. So first of all, the Kansas City Chiefs, they're going to be the visiting team on Sunday. At least I believe they were because the Bengals were the home team last year. So how they got here, the Chiefs were 14-3 in the regular season, AFC West champs, number one in the AFC. They have the number one offense in yards per game and points per game in the regular season. They were 11th defensively in yards allowed per game and 16th in points allowed per game this season. This postseason, they defeated the Jaguars 27-20 in the divisional round, defeated the Bengals 23-20 in the AFC Championship game. Mahomes is second in passer rating among quarterbacks who have played multiple games this postseason because, like, Kirk Cousins is at the top, which is kind of funny because he's like number one and had this great game, but we still kind of crap on him because he's Kirk Cousins. But he had a really good game, and he's been at the top of that list. But over this postseason for Mahomes, 70% completions, 4 touchdowns, no picks, mostly on one leg, which is pretty incredible. He's been hurt since the second quarter of that Jacksonville game.
Yeah.
But, looking at like the biggest reason and the biggest thing that stands out for the Chiefs as far as like how they got here, let's go ahead and talk about the obvious thing. Going into this season, the big, talking point was the fact that there's no Tyreek Hill on the out wide at wide receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs. And this team, that's like the one thing. I mean, this Kansas City Chiefs team is relatively similar to the one that made the Super Bowl against the 49ers a couple of years ago. They're similar to the one that was in it just a couple of years ago against the Buccaneers. Like, not a whole lot has changed except for no Tyreek Hill. In 2021, Tyreek Hill led the Chiefs in receiving with over 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns. He and Travis Kelce accounted for 48% of the team's receiving yards and 49% of passing touchdowns. So you thought, hey, without one of those two in that dynamic duo, like this offense is going to take a step back. looking at this season, Travis Kelce has still got his. He's made up 25% of KC's passing yards and 30% of passing touchdowns. But the two offseason acquisitions to replace Hill in 22, Juju Smith-Schuster and Marquez Valdez-Scantling, like they've risen to the occasion. Scantling a little bit more in the postseason, Juju Smith-Schuster in the regular season. It's kind of makes me think a little. I know I take a lot of comparisons over to baseball, but it kind of like a Moneyball thing. Like, okay, we don't have the big heavy hitter anymore, but let's get two guys that can kind of give us that same production and see what we can do. For Juju Smith-Schuster, he was second on the team in receiving yards with 933, and he has 3 touchdowns on the year. Marquez Valdez-Scantling was third in the regular season in receiving yards for Kansas City, but is second in that category this postseason for KC, and has caught 2 of Mahomes' 4 touchdown passes. And, this is to show that while Kelce is still a focal point for Mahomes, and the offense, and that the offense is certainly different with no Tyreek Hill, the Chiefs are still the best offense in football. We all wondered how they would do. We talked about the AFC West. Is there a chance, with this, new look AFC West where Herbert was going to take the next step? Derek Carr and Devontae Adams were going to be unstoppable. Russell Wilson was going to be unstoppable in Denver. What's going to happen with Kansas City? Well, they went out and showed us that, no Tyreek Hill, no problem.
Yeah, so when I look at this Kansas City Chiefs team, they haven't had the same full-on success as the New England Patriots did with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, but the recipe is there for them. For me, why they're here yet again is consistency. One of the biggest things is that Andy Reid's been the head coach the entire time. That's right. Yeah, but offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy. You're not changing coaches. You're not losing coaches. You're not firing coaches. You're not hiring new coaches. There's not a ton of turnover. These teams that are consistently struggling are constantly in the turnover battle, and not like losing the ball, but just turnover on the coaching staff constantly. And they're at one of those. They're at a point where one of their coordinators has shown really good signs of success, and he's gone as a head coach. So now it's time for a new coordinator. This Kansas City Chiefs team has held the coaching staff together for the most part. And that kind of consistency, especially when you've had consistency on offense, it just makes your team get better and better, and you are able to absorb losing a type of player like Tyreek Hill. And because you're not having to spend every offseason or every 2 off seasons learning a whole new system. And so Patrick Mahomes has been able to grow in this system and get better with it and learn how to adapt it to his abilities and the players that are on his team. So that's how this team has just been constantly getting to this point, whether it be the knocking on the door of the Super Bowl or to the Super Bowl. So yeah, there's a lot of numbers that you can look at with productivity and everything, but for me, it's just the consistency of the coaching staff and the ability to take the scheme that they have built into that coaching staff has built and grow on it and get better at it year after year after year, rather than having to every so often learn a whole new scheme.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. That consistency has been there. And you brought up Mahomes and being able to adapt and get better. One thing that I thought was interesting during that broadcast for the AFC Championship game was that Tony Romo kept comparing Mahomes to Michael Jordan, which, look, I had the same reaction. I kind of shook my head because I was like, look, dude Mahomes is great. I'm not going to say anything negative about Mahomes, but can he win 2 championships before we, compare him?
Before we put him on even in the same stratosphere as Tom Brady and Peyton Manning.
Right.
We can't call this guy the GOAT because he can throw a sidewinder from falling sideways. And he throws it like he's throwing a Nerf ball.
Right.
I get it. He's a talented freak athlete.
Right.
We can say that. That's when it comes to that, as far as quarterbacks go, yeah, he's right up there. But
well, we do. I mean, it's hard not to do this. I mean, I know I did this with Andrew Luck as far as because of how good we thought. We were projecting what his career is going to look like before he actually goes and does it. Because I remember when we had when we had the discussion a couple of years ago on the podcast of could Tom Brady potentially come to the Colts the year they got Philip Rivers? I was like, well, he wouldn't wear number 12 because I think it'd be weird. Like, and they're like, well, yeah, who cares about number 12? Because Andrew Luck didn't really. I mean, he was amazing. We feel bad that he ends up retiring, but he didn't actually like. He never won a Super
Do
Bowl.
anything.
Didn't win an MVP. I mean, it was impossible for him to do that in those circumstances.
He
But
made one AFC Championship game.
right, so it's like we do this thing where we give all these athletes kind of accolades before they actually get them. But I thought it was a funny kind of question to ask. How close to 7 rings does Mahomes need to get to unseat Brady as the GOAT? We always see the argument made in basketball. Speaking of Michael Jordan, people talk about like who's the best. When we've had this debate on our show even before, who's better, Jordan or LeBron? So I was like, let's have that same argument with Mahomes and Brady. So MJ has 6 titles. LeBron has 4. Brady currently has 7. Mahomes currently has 1. And so, kind of projecting that out, how many would he have to win to kind of get into that GOAT stratosphere? I think it's at least 4 for Mahomes. It's at least 4. Maybe 5. I'm not entirely sure. Mahomes is finishing his age 27 season. Let's say he has another 13 to 15 seasons left. So winning 3 more times is very doable as far as like the years are there. It's not like, he's just now coming into his own at like age 33 and the window is shrinking. At the short end of that, he's on pace for 62,288 yards, which would put him 8th all time, and 499 touchdowns, which would put him at 5th all time. Brady is first in both categories. Brady has 3 MVPs. Mahomes already has 1. These points are to say that Mahomes is on pace to have a career that, even without the Super Bowls, is right there with TB12. So he'd have the MVPs, he'd have the touchdowns, he'd have the yardage. So the last thing kind of in that argument would be how many Super Bowls has he won? Only 3 quarterbacks have won 4 Super Bowls. Obviously, Tom Brady, Montana, and Bradshaw both have 4. All 4 are also over 500 in the big game as well. Brady is 7-3. Bradshaw and Montana is 4-0. Look, the number is probably 5 here. Like I said, it's probably 5 because then you'd have those are the only 2 quarterbacks to win that amount of Super Bowls. So just he and Brady are the only 2 at that many. But I think 4 Super Bowl wins in 6 to 7 appearances, because again, he has to be above 500. He can't, because that's the whole knock against LeBron is that, like, yeah, he's won 4, but he's also been to like 9 and has lost. So he's lost over half of them. But yeah, 4 Super Bowl wins in 6 to 7 appearances, 3+ MVPs, finishing top 10 in passing yards, top 5 in passing touchdowns. I think that would give Mahomes a damn good case to be considered the GOAT. But I mean, even the fact that we're saying a case to unseat Brady might give you the answer already to that question. But no less than that, though. That's where I think Mahomes would have to be if we're going to go ahead, and that's where he has to be, as opposed to one championship making a good play in an AFC championship game like Tony Romo wanted to do.
So I think when we look at, so originally you had the question here as how many rings does Mahomes have to get to unseat Brady as the GOAT? To unseat Brady as the GOAT, he needs to get at least 7 with winning multiples in a row. It can't be like every 2 years he wins one.
Well, that's what Brady did, though. Brady, like every other year there for a while, was in the Super Bowl.
But then he also reeled off like 3 in a row here. He reeled off like 3 in 4 years.
By this time, yeah, by the time Mahomes is his age now, I think Brady already had 3. I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't keep track of people's birthdays. So I struggle enough to keep track of my own family's birthdays. So trying to keep track of other people's that I don't even know personally, trying to keep track of their birthdays. Yeah. But look, he's got to win, I think, 7 to be able to unseat. Now, to be in the conversation, he needs to win a couple more MVPs. He needs to put together some really high statistical numbers. He needs to win at least 3, I'll say, Super Bowls. Because look, when we look at the conversation of the GOAT, the greatest of all time, the greatest quarterback to ever play, the 2 that always come up are Brady and Peyton, Tom and Peyton. We don't really talk about Terry Bradshaw or Joe Montana, even though they won. They were both 4-0 in the Super Bowl, whereas Peyton was 2-2. Um, but Peyton put up these unearthly numbers throughout his career, and probably would still hold quite a few of the records had Tom Brady not played till he was 45. And again, I don't know if he's 45 because I don't
Yeah,
keep track of
he's
people's
45.
birthdays. 45, okay.
Yeah.
Same thing, like and then you have to at least win more than one, because then you look at players like Drew Brees, who held all of those records for a while and only won one Super Bowl. But Drew Brees is not in the conversation for the greatest of all time. Then you look at a player from the past like Dan Marino, who was a really, 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 really good quarterback, but never won a Super Bowl. And he's not in those conversations. So I think it comes down to just a conglomerate of things, not just winning the Super Bowls, but being able to put up consistent MVP and record-breaking numbers. I think it's going to be a little bit harder for Mahomes to do that, and he's going to have to rely more on not record-breaking numbers. It's going to be harder for him to get the record-breaking numbers because he relies so much on his feet as well. A lot of their offense is nothing there. He makes something out of nothing. And that can win you Super Bowls and that can win you MVPs, but it's not going to get you the passing records or anything like that. So I think MVPs and Super Bowls are going to be Mahomes' way to get into that conversation. Everybody's kind of got some sort of niche that's in that conversation. Is that making any sense?
Yeah, so
because there's so many players that have won a lot of Super Bowls that we just don't put into the conversation. Like Joe Montana is not consistently in the conversation for greatest of all time, and we're always looking at Tom Brady and Peyton Manning.
Right. So because Tom Brady is in another stratosphere, which again I think answers the question right there as far as like who's the GOAT, it's whatever, but he's in such a different stratosphere that it has been a long time since we've heard. I mean, I think Bradshaw isn't talked about as much just because a lot of that is the steel curtain and not so much. Right. I mean, heck, I've back when I had a little bit more time on my hands, I watched all the Americas games, like the documentary that they used to do and I think they still do for the Super Bowl champions. And I think Terry Bradshaw at one point was like either benched or he didn't go into the season as like QB1, even like after some of the Super Bowl wins. It's because like he wasn't as much of a focal point of that offense. Like he was, like, I'm not sitting here saying Terry Bradshaw wasn't a good quarterback. I mean, he was. But it was the fact that I think he's kind of overshadowed a bit by how good that defense was, and that kind of thing. But when Brady was first kind of having that first dynasty, he did get compared to Joe Montana, and that was kind of the comparison that a lot of people made. And I think that's why you say 3, and I just think. Or in that in that ballpark, and that's why like yes he can win the MVPs, yes he can do all the stuff with the numbers, but I think he can. I think that's why the Super Bowls are so critical, because the Super Bowl he can win the Super Bowls without having the MVPs and all that stuff to be considered, but he can't like have all those numbers and then not have the Super Bowls, which I think is what you're trying to say. Like you have to have both, but you definitely need the Super Bowls to be able to do that.
But Peyton's only got 2.
I don't know that. I don't know.
I think Peyton is looked at as one of the greatest of all time because of the mind that he had. The way that he could read a game and read a defense and just maneuver his team on the fly put him in that conversation.
Yeah. And
he had an uncanny ability that not many people had. Like the way it was just, I mean, yes, he could throw the ball amazing. He was a really great quarterback, but the way he could just be like 3 steps ahead of his opponent, it felt like, was I think what really put him in that conversation.
Right. And I think that also, why it's kind of changed a little bit too is that it's the same argument we hear with MJ and LeBron is like one of the big things that gets talked about there is like, oh, well, they played in different eras. That's kind of the same why we don't talk about Montana and Bradshaw as much now because like, oh, well, the game is completely different from what it was back then than it is now. But yeah, I think
I
definitely
don't know how much different it is from Montana because Montana was in a very pass happy offense.
right, but still like the way like
I guess
go
compared to
go
what like nowadays there are like passing is the name of the game and you run to set up the pass where back
and the
then you
rules
you
and
ran
are so
you
much more geared to passing and that kind of thing, like with the defensive
yeah.
holding and pass
So
interference.
they were a
Like,
little bit more of ahead of their time
right.
with Montana.
So, but yeah, I think definitely. So I think the number we land on is like 4-ish. Is where
To be in the conversation.
right.
To
Yeah,
unseat Brady, you have to at least win 7 and one more MVP than he ever did.
yeah. I mean,
But to be in the conversation, I think you need to win 3 more, including the one you've already got.
oh, so you do need to have 4. That's what you're saying. You need to win 3 more, is
Yeah,
what you're saying. Okay, I thought you
yeah.
meant just 3 alone. I was like, I don't know
No, no.
if he needs
I
to
may
win
have
only
been, I
one.
think I worded that wrong.
Yeah,
But yeah, you need 3 more.
I gotcha. Well, we'll get back more to the Chiefs here in just a little bit. But let's go ahead and shift gears to the Philadelphia Eagles and how they got here. They also are 14-3, won their division, the NFC East, and are number 1 in their conference, the NFC. They are number 3 offensively in yards per game and points per game. They were number 3 offensively in yards per game and points per game in the regular season. They are second in the NFL in yards allowed per game and 8th in points allowed per game. This postseason, they defeated the Giants 38-7 in the divisional round and won 31-7 in the NFC Championship game versus the 49ers. Hassan Reddick leads the league in sacks this postseason with 3.5. Of course, had a big the forced fumble that knocked Brock Purdy out of the game in the NFC Championship as well. The biggest reason why they got here, I mean, the Eagles, you can kind of go any direction you want with this as far as like how they got here and what's the biggest reason why they're here, the driving force. Because I mean, just like a team just like you'd expect for a team that went from getting bounced in the wild card round as a 7 seed to a Super Bowl, like pretty much everything's improved. I mean, the Birds have seen improvements in yards per game, passing yards per game, points per game, yards allowed per game, passing yards allowed per game, and points allowed per game. So like the defense is better, the offense is better, but I want to focus on the defensive front for Philly. The front 7, especially from a pass defense perspective. They have 70 sacks on the season, which is the third highest single season total in NFL history. 4 of the top 16 in sacks this season are Eagles. Hassan Reddick has 16, Brandon Graham, Javon Hargrave, and Josh Sweat all have 11. It's safe to say that unit is a big reason why the Eagles are the third best in terms of opponent passer rating. Now, Philly has played 12 games against quarterbacks in the lower half of the league in QBR and 10 games versus the top half of the league in sacks. They've played 10 games versus the top half of the league in sacks allowed, and they did go from 9th to 17th against the run. So there are some things that kind of could say, like, maybe this isn't, maybe the numbers are a little bit deceiving, but I think overall the defense has improved greatly, and in large part it's because of that front 7. They have so many good playmakers on that defensive line, in that linebacker core, that just make that defense so great.
Yeah, when I look at this Eagles team, yeah, that defense is just phenomenal. But they're young, they're energized. I don't know, they play almost with a chip on their shoulder. And I just feel like they made a lot of moves to bring in pieces, but they were the right moves. Sometimes people make moves just to make moves. They think it's going to get them better. They made these moves at like bringing in I cannot remember his first name, Brown, AJ Brown
AJ Brown, yep.
from Tennessee. Um, that it's not like AJ Brown has been earth shattering for Philadelphia. He's been really good, but it's just another piece that made every other piece better. And they all have bought in It's a young coaching staff. It's a young team. It's got veteran leadership on it, but like a lot of your key components are young. And I don't know. I just feel like their energy. There's something about this team that just pumps you up almost when you watch them. You feel more energized. Um, it's a team that keeps you on the edge of your seat because they're a big play waiting to happen on either side of the ball. So I don't know. Last year they struggled. I know they had struggled with injuries and there was a lot of questions. Is Jalen Hurts the answer? I mean, for a lot of the season, he was not the starting quarterback. He was kind of off and on last year, if I remember right.
I think you
I don't
might
know.
be thinking of the year because he was the full-fledged starter last year because
Okay,
of
so
the
it
Carson
was the
Wentz
year
trade.
before. Yeah, it was the year before. Was it?
Yeah, last year was the year
Yeah,
before last was Carson Wentz, so he had been traded that year,
yeah,
or like he'd
but
become the starting
they're
quarterback then.
just they didn't have. I guess maybe because it was a new coach with Nick Sirianni last year, that you didn't feel that same energy. But this year, I don't know. There's just this aura about them that you never really had any doubt. I mean, I think a lot of people wanted San Francisco to be here because of the Brock Purdy story.
Mm-hmm.
How cool would it be for Mr. Irrelevant to lead his team to a Super Bowl? Um, but I don't think there was just any denying this Philadelphia team. I mean, yeah, they had rough games here and there, but they always bounced back. They always figured out a way to claw out of a deficit. I mean, look, the beaten down Indianapolis Colts had this Philadelphia team on the ropes
Mm-hmm.
and lost to them, I think, by 1 point,
Yeah,
wasn't
lost
it?
17-16.
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts had the C's part ahead of him and basically walked in the end zone to score the game-winning touchdown.
Scripted.
Yeah, it's rigged. It's
It's
all rigged.
rigged.
Well, one person like you mentioned that has enjoyed the script this year is Jalen Hurts, and that gets us into we talked about Mahomes' legacy with this win. What would a Super Bowl win do for Jalen Hurts? And the question on that side of the spectrum is, with a Super Bowl ring, is Jalen Hurts a top 3 quarterback in the NFL right now? My answer to that question is yes. I think it's safe to say, obviously, unanimous 1-2 is Mahomes Burrow. I think Mahomes Burrow is 1-2. I think that's what a majority of people would go with. Now, I think after that, especially after this postseason, the waters get a little bit muddier. Looking at this season's playoff quarterbacks, obviously Burrow, Mahomes, there's not a big enough sample size for Purdy. Josh Allen has struggled to get over the hump. Kirk Cousins has never made it past the divisional round. Brady retired. Dak has never made it past the divisional round. Lamar Jackson has an MVP, but has struggled to stay healthy. Tua certainly has had his health concerns. Then you look at the quarterbacks like Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, Daniel Jones, Geno Smith. They were all good this season, but is this season the norm or the outlier? Which you can certainly say for Jalen Hurts as well, but Hurts would have that Super Bowl ring or that Super Bowl trophy. Only 6 active quarterbacks have won a Super Bowl. That's Aaron Rodgers, Joe Flacco, Russell Wilson, Nick Foles, Patrick Mahomes, and Matthew Stafford. I would take Hurts above all of them right now. Like, with how Aaron Rodgers played this season, wouldn't go with him. Who knows about Stafford, but like, those would be the only 2 that I would consider. Obviously, Joe Flacco's a backup. Nick Foles is a backup. Russell Wilson's coming off of like his worst season of his career. So I think I would take Hurts over all of them right now. So like, you might take other quarterbacks. There's other quarterbacks that it's kind of like the draft. You may like their pedigree a little bit more, but there's question marks with all of them. When I think of the best blank right now, I think of, if you were to redraft the league right now, who would be the 3rd quarterback off the board? And I think with the Super Bowl ring, it'd be hard to not take Jalen Hurts, especially with his ability to beat you both with his arms and his legs. Reverse it. His arm and his legs, not just one leg. He beat you with both of them. I think that, if he would be the third quarterback off the board if he were to get that Super Bowl ring. So I would put him as the top of a top 3 quarterback in the league currently with the ring. I think he's top 5 right now without it, but I would go ahead and put him in that top 3 category if they were to win the Super Bowl on Sunday.
Yeah, I wanted to say no, but then the argument you just laid out swayed me
Thank you.
because in my mind they've got you thinking, well, no, Josh Allen's in that conversation. But you're right. Josh Allen has failed to get over the hump. I haven't seen any progression from Josh Allen, really. So yeah, I think you're right. If Jalen Hurts were to win a Super Bowl, get the raise the Lombardi Trophy this weekend, that puts him as a top 3 quarterback in this league. I wanted to say no because I wanted to see him put up a similar performance next year. Not meaning like, oh, win another Super Bowl, but like statistically and get his team back in that position again. Because I want it before I crown anybody as a top 3, I want to make sure there's consistency there. At least with Josh Allen, he's consistently getting his team within the conversation. I want to make sure this Philadelphia Eagles team isn't a one-hit wonder because we all probably after last year would have said, oh yeah, Matthew Stafford, holy moly, definitely a top 3 quarterback now. And look, he's coming back with all of that again. And then the wheels fell off.
Yeah.
So that's the only hesitation I have of saying, oh yeah, he's definitely a top 3 quarterback if he wins the Super Bowl this year. I want to put him there, but like on probationary status.
Well, I mean
if that makes sense.
That's what right now is. It doesn't. It's not a definite. This is the we're not saying Jalen Hurts is the best like top 3 quarterback ever or the top 3 quarterback like of the decade or anything like that. It's just like as of right now, power rankings. Who's number 1, who's number 2, who's number 3, and the kind of consensus going into the season and even throughout the season, Burrow, Mahomes, Allen. But I mean, you bring up Allen. I mean, you're right. He didn't take a next step, and not only that, it just kind of seemed like he kind of sleptwalked through the 2 playoff games. Like he had that really good first few series against the Dolphins, and then from there it was just kind of ho hum the rest of the way. From Josh Allen. Whereas like even last year, you had that amazing. Now I get it. The circumstances were a little bit different in terms of like you were playing your the big brother Patriots in the first round, and you scored on 7. You scored on 7 out of 7 possessions, and then the next game was that just insane game against the Chiefs. So I get it. It was a little bit different circumstances. This time you were the 2 seed. You had home field. You're gonna kind of it was almost a foregone conclusion that it was going to be Bills Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, and so you kind of got that air that like they didn't really have that fire that they should have had in those 2 playoff games. So that's why I'm like, even now, like injury concerns for Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. I mean, I saw a TikTok where someone was like, playoff Josh Allen is primetime Kirk Cousins, and I was like, I mean, there's a compelling argument for why that's true. I still think I like Josh Allen better in a playoff game than I do Kirk Cousins in primetime, but I mean, I don't see really too many lies there.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, I'm just also looking at, like you said, if you were to redraft the league right now, who are the first 3 quarterbacks off the board? And I could see Jalen Hurts, but at the same time, there's an argument to be had at the same time for Trevor Lawrence.
Well, right. Also, too, like this is with a Super Bowl. Like if Jalen Hurts doesn't have a Super Bowl, then I don't know that I would put him 3. I think he's top 5 personally, but I think with a Super Bowl proven, hey, this guy has gone out and won a Super Bowl, like a proven track record. I think you go with Jalen Hurts.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
All right, well, coming up here in just a moment, we're going to get into our predictions. We're going to do kind of a tail of the tape, go through each positional group. But before we do that, let's go ahead and talk about our friends of the show, First of all, from Anchor, the Crash Course podcast is brought to you by Anchor. Looking to start a podcast but don't know where to start? Look no further than Anchor.fm. Anchor allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your computer or mobile device and will distribute it to other sites such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. On a budget, not only is Anchor completely free of charge, but will allow you to make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started. Anchor, it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Also, the Crash Course podcast is brought to you by Eat Lunch and Board Game, heard weekly on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever podcasts can be heard. Board games build bridges. This week, we're going to do a hot or a cold, but it's going to be a little bit different. We're going to, instead of hot or cold, it's going to be Chiefs or Eagles. And basically, we're going to go through these two teams' position groups, position group by position group, but instead of saying hot or cold, we're going to go Chiefs or Eagles. And so it's kind of a tail of the tape. We're going to go quarterback, running back, wide receiver, so on. And then that's all going to lead up to our prediction for Super Bowl 57. So, first of all, we're going to obviously start with the quarterback. I thought about going in reverse order and doing quarterback last, but that just felt weird. So we're going to go quarterback first. And I'm going Chiefs here. Mahomes has been better than Hurts the last two seasons in terms of QBR. In 2021, Mahomes was 5th, Hurts was 19th. Of course, the big improvement for Hurts this year. Mahomes was first, Hurts was 4th. Hurts has been better than Mahomes this postseason in terms of total QBR, but again, it's still very close. But the difference maker for me, why I'm putting Mahomes as the better quarterback in this matchup, is that Mahomes has 13 playoff starts, including 2 Super Bowl appearances. Hurts 2 starts or Hurts 3 starts, a loss in the wild card last season, and 2 games that were decided fairly quickly, 2 blowout wins over the Giants and the 49ers. Give me Mahomes.
Yeah, experience matters here. I'm taking Mahomes here as well. I mean, he's been here before. He's been on the winning side. He's been on the losing side. He knows what both feel like, and he knows which one he doesn't want to feel again. So give me Mahomes.
As far as running backs go, give me Philadelphia. Miles Sanders was 5th this season in rushing with 1,260 yards. He was 8th in rushing touchdowns with 11. No Chief within the top 20 in either of those categories. Also, Kenneth Gainwell and Sanders are 4th and 5th this postseason in rushing. This rushing attack can be very deadly. Give me Philadelphia.
Yeah, for some reason, I don't understand why Kansas City's rushing attack has fallen off. I mean, I thought they were going to be really, really good with Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah, who's been kind of an afterthought on
it's
that
so
team.
weird.
It's Pacheco and McKinnon now, and I think it's more or less because they're both so integrated into the passing game that, like, their names, they're good, but they just, as far as, like, the rushing attack goes, they're just not on the same level as the Eagles are.
Yeah, so, yeah, I'm taking Philadelphia's running game here for sure.
Now, looking at the wide receivers, I'm going the Eagles here as well. You brought up A.J. Brown earlier. He was 4th in receiving this season with 1,500 yards. Devonta Smith was 9th with nearly 1,200. Brown was tied for 3rd in receiving touchdowns with 11. There are some question marks regarding the Chiefs' receiving core and their health going into the Super Bowl. But even with those question marks, I think I still go Eagles here. No Chiefs receiver had over 1,000 yards this season. The only Chiefs receiver that was over 1,000 yards was Travis Kelce, who we'll get to in just a moment.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't count as a wide receiver, so you have to go with the Eagles here. A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith are just an unbelievable tandem to have. I think if Tyreek Hill was still with the Chiefs, we might be talking a little bit different, but that's definitely the Eagles there as well.
As far as tight ends go, we mentioned him just a second ago. He's one of 2 brothers in the Super Bowl. Easy Chiefs here. I talked earlier about the big portion of the passing game that Travis Kelce takes up. He's 8th in receiving yards this season with 1,338. He's 2nd in receiving touchdowns with 12. This postseason, he's 4th in receiving yards with 176 and tied for 1st in receiving touchdowns with 3. One even coming from Chad Henne. So he is, an amazing threat at tight end. Like, yes, Dallas Goedert is serviceable, but he's not nearly on the level that Travis Kelce is.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Travis Kelce is like there isn't many times a tight end is able to take over a game. There's not many tight ends out there that can actually do that, even in the history of the NFL. I mean, um, I can maybe think of three, including Travis Kelsey, maybe four total. So this one's easy. This is Travis Kelsey and the Chiefs because he's just a game changer.
Now, offensive line, it's kind of a toss up here. I wanted to go Eagles just because PFF, Pro Football Focus, has the Eagles ranked as the number one offensive line. But I'm going to go to the Chiefs here. And the reason being that the Chiefs are fourth in that ranking. So they're right there with Philadelphia. But also, they've allowed 18 fewer sacks this season. KC is third in sacks allowed. Philly is 22nd. So far fewer sacks. Now I get it. That's Hurts maybe getting tackled behind the line of scrimmage, trying to make something happen with his feet. So that may skew the numbers just a little bit, but I'm still going Chiefs here.
I'm actually going to go with the Eagles because Pat Mahomes just doesn't get sacked in general. I mean, it doesn't matter what if the line breaks down or not. He just doesn't get sacked. He's a smart quarterback. Even when there's nothing there, he tries to make something, and if there's nothing there for him to make something out of, he just gets rid of the ball. He doesn't take the sack. He's smart when it comes to that. So some of that is kind of skewed because of Pat Mahomes and who he is. But I'm going with the Eagles because look, their running backs are good. They're kind of a well-rounded offense. And in order to be that, your offensive line has to be solid at both pass protection and rush protection, and they are. They get the job done. So I'm going with the Eagles offensive line on this one.
As far as we're now switching over to the defensive side, we're going to do, instead of doing like defensive line, linebackers, safeties, all that stuff, we're just going to do run defense and pass defense. Run defense, who's better between the Chiefs and Eagles? I'm going with Kansas City. The Chiefs are 8th in rushing yards allowed this season. The Eagles are 17th. Kansas City is 6th in rushing touchdowns allowed. Philly is 19th. The fumble numbers are basically the same, so I'm going to go ahead and take the Chiefs there. They're just a little bit they're just so much glaringly better, in those two categories against the run. So I'm going Kansas City.
I got to go with Kansas City here too. George Karlaftis on the line there. Going with Kansas City. I mean, look, when Pat Mahomes went down with an injury, that defense kept them in that game, and it's a solid defense. I will say this in this game. I think the defense we're going to be truly talking about is the Philadelphia defense, but the Chiefs defense is going to do enough to be warranted in that conversation. So I'm going to say the Chiefs run defense here.
As far as pass defense goes, I'm going Philadelphia. The Philly is first in passing yards allowed. Kansas City is 19th. The Chiefs have allowed the most passing touchdowns in the league this season. The Eagles are 13th in that category. The Eagles are 6th in interceptions. Chiefs are 22nd. The Eagles are 3rd in opponent passer rating. The Chiefs are 27th. And these two teams are the top 2 in sacks. So give me the Eagles pass defense over Kansas City.
Yeah, I'm going to take the oh gosh, I had it here and I just lost it.
You just lost the script. The script
Yeah,
for
I'm going with the Philadelphia Eagles pass defense here as well. When look, the key is you got to keep the other team's receivers out of the end zone, and it's going to be a tall task for Philadelphia because of a game changer in Travis Kelsey. But I'm not going to say, I'm not going to look at this based off of this matchup. The whole body tells me it's the Philadelphia secondary. This Philadelphia pass defense is what is the better one of the two. They're going to be, it's going to be a good battle, but give me Philadelphia.
And finally, we're going to throw special teams in there as well. Who is the better unit on special teams? It's pretty tough to gauge this one. The Chiefs are better in kick returns. Philly's better on punt returns. The Eagles kicker Jake Elliott has made 5 of 6 field goals from 50-plus yards this season. Harrison Butker of the Chiefs was 3 of 7 from 50-plus yards, but is 2 for 2 this postseason. Tommy Townsend is first in the league in net punt yards. So I'm leaning Chiefs here. I'll go, especially like if if Butker hadn't had those two 50-plus yard field goals this season or this postseason, excuse me, then I would have probably gone Eagles here, but it's leaning Chiefs, so I'll go Chiefs.
I'm gonna go with the Eagles just because their return game is a little bit better. Um, honestly, I feel like special teams in the NFL is becoming null,
Yeah,
anyways.
except for kicking.
Except for
Yeah,
kickers kicking like field goals and everything,
yeah.
and extra points. That's about it. I mean,
There's no more returns. I mean,
and punters.
punts feel for field position and all
Yeah, but give me Kansas City.
All right.
I mean, some of these are like this is a very even matchup
Oh
if
yeah.
you ask me.
Oh yeah.
And it's hard to pick between the two. So I don't know. I'm trying to be as even as possible. I think
Yeah.
I was pretty even.
I think so. Well, you said it's tough to pick between the two, but now it's time
Now
for
it's time
you
to pick.
to pick between the two.
I know. I know.
It's so tough because I mean, heck, I said it a couple of weeks ago in our championship preview episode. Like, I could have seen any of those four teams, whether it be the Niners, the Bengals, the Chiefs, the Eagles. I could have seen any of those four teams win the Super Bowl. And now that we're down to two, it's not any easier. I could see either of these two teams make sense. So we're gonna go ahead and do our prediction, and just like we did in that NFC Championship and AFC Championship preview, we're gonna also give you one 3+ leg parlay for all of you betting folks out there as well. So my parlay is this. It's a plus 950, so pretty decent payout if this one hits. I've got Chiefs money line, Miles Sanders and Travis Kelce as anytime touchdown scorers. We mentioned, how good the running game is for Philadelphia. We mentioned how crucial Travis Kelce is to the passing game. And I have Patrick Mahomes with 250 plus yards and 3+ touchdowns in the big game in Super Bowl 57. My prediction looking at this, I really thought I was going to go Eagles here, and it really is a toss up. I mean, this reason why I went Kansas City money line is literally because it's like the spread is like -1. Like that's literally what it is. It's 1 point, which at that point you might as well just go money line because that makes more sense to do that. Mahomes is the better quarterback, more Super Bowl experience. We already talked about that. The Eagles are better running the ball, but that's where the Kansas City defense excels. And just overall, I just like the road that it took for Kansas City to get to this point. Now, I think these two teams have combined for 4 playoff games. And in all 4 of those playoff games, even though Kansas City's were obviously closer, it never felt like either team was really tested, if that makes sense. Like, on the Eagles side, they got a Giants team that, like, yes, they had barely snuck by them at home like a couple weeks ago late in the regular season, but also throttled them at MetLife Stadium even a few weeks prior to that. And then they played a San Francisco team that halfway through the first quarter didn't have a quarterback. For Kansas City, yeah, it was close between the Jaguars and the Chiefs, but you really never thought the Chiefs were in danger of losing that game. Same with like the Bengals played a better game, but you thought if the Bengals won that game a couple weeks ago that it's going to be because the Chiefs lost it, not because the Bengals won it, because the Chiefs kind of dominated that game. I don't think the Bengals led it at any point in that game. So, but I think overall, what the Chiefs have had to go through in this postseason, I think they're just more battle tested. I think they've been to the Super Bowl before. We've talked about that, but also just this postseason and just in general what they have to deal with in the AFC as opposed to the NFC. I mean, I brought up that stat earlier, and that kind of turned me off to some of the Philadelphia defensive stats. Like, don't take anything away. Philadelphia still has a great defense, and they're a great team overall. But the fact that they've just played, like I said, they have all these great stats against quarterbacks, and yet a lot of the quarterbacks they faced this season weren't all that good. A lot of the passing teams they played weren't really the best passing teams that they could have played. Now, granted, I didn't look into those same numbers for the Chiefs. Maybe they're similar, but just the road that it took Kansas City to get here, I like it a little bit more. I think, like I said, I think they're a little bit more battle tested. I'm going Kansas City to win the Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, so for me, the 3-leg parlay that I've got at plus 1,000, Chiefs money line, Pat Mahomes alternate passing yards at 300 or more, and Travis Kelce to score 2 or more touchdowns. Honestly, I think that's what it's going to take for the Chiefs to win this game. You need to have a huge game from Mahomes and from Travis Kelce. And, you know, like I said earlier, when you get to the Super Bowl, experience sometimes matters over that first time being there. Yeah, I do believe there's several players on that Eagles team that were on the last Super Bowl team. So they're good veteran presence.
Jason Kelce, I know, was there.
Yeah, but this Chiefs team, like I said earlier, they've been on both sides of it at the Super Bowl. You know, they've been celebrating, and they've also been watching another team celebrate, and they know how both of those feel, and they know which one they don't want to feel again. I think that matters in this. With it being, is this their third appearance in 4 years?
Something like that, because, yeah, it was Chiefs 49ers, then it was Rams, Patriots in between that? No. There was another one in between it. Wait, did they go back-to-back years?
I feel like they
Did they go Patriots? Because they would have
I will say
they would have had to have, because it was 2020.
2020 screwed everything
Right,
up.
exactly. So yeah, it was the 2020 Super Bowl that they were in it. Then 2021, yeah. So they did go back-to-back years. So yeah, this is their third appearance in 4 years.
So this is becoming habit for them. They know how to prepare for it. They're not going to be overwhelmed by, I mean, not to say that Philadelphia is going to be overwhelmed, but the Chiefs are going to be less overwhelmed. So the Chiefs, this is what they expect. And that kind of calmness will help them in this game, I think. And like I said, it's going to be a close game. It's going to be a tough battle, but I think ultimately that experience of being in this game, being on both sides of winning and losing in this game, and just being consistently knowing this is where you are supposed to be year after year, and that's where the Chiefs have gotten. I think all of that leads to them raising the Lombardi Trophy yet again.
Well, there you have it. We have picked our Super Bowl champions. Let's go see what happens. Like I said before, it's going to be a great game. Don't have a dog in the fight, so I guess technically we do now because we both picked our Super Bowl champions. But and I mean, you have to stick with the Chiefs because that was your preseason pick as well. So we're close to you having that pick right, B. Scott. But that will do it for this week's edition of the Crash Course Podcast. Thank you guys all for hanging out, watching, listening, all that good stuff. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter at 3C Media Sports. Go like us on Facebook, 3C Media. Go check out the TikTok channel as well as the YouTube channel. If you're not already there, go hit subscribe, ring the bell for all that great content. And remember, you can listen to us every week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course Podcast. You can find me at Crash Course FM on Twitter. Pete Scott, where can they find you?
Find me on Twitter at Brandon_Scott87.
No podcast next week, but we are going to be back with a Daytona 500 preview as a standalone video coming out, not this weekend, obviously, but the weekend following. So a lot of content coming down the pike. Get excited for that. But until then, enjoy the Super Bowl, everyone.